So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Ray, for the kind introduction. And so once you've done your study, you want to publish it. And you want to publish it because you want to transmit your findings. That's bottom line. So why do you want to publish? And this is very important. You want to communicate important information that will advance the science or the knowledge of the people. You don't want to publish just because your name is going to show up there. You want to publish because you have something important to communicate. You want to create debate, you want to share experiences, you want to educate people, or you want to change practice. And at the end of the day, all of us who see patients, what we want to do is make the patients' lives better. Just because we have better treatments, or we have better ways to teach the patients, et cetera. Now, by the way, this will lead to improving your CV. This cannot be your primary goal. Your primary goal cannot be to have a lot of papers. Your primary goal has to be the main objectives. Why do you want to publish this? So don't think about your CV. That comes just as a consequence of publishing good data, all right? Obviously, you improve your CV, you get promoted, and you establish yourself as an expert, but this is all secondary. So what are you going to write about? And you've been hearing from Ray, you've been hearing from Anna and from Jazz. It all starts with a question. Does diabetes lead to cancer, right? And the question comes from seeing patients. I think that this is so important. You know, I have a lot of clinical activities, and I could get away from them, but I still want to continue seeing patients because my questions for research come from seeing my patients. So your questions come from seeing patients, or you read something, or you try to figure out something from a patient, and you read the literature, and it's not clear. It's not clear what you're going to do with this patient. Or you go to a presentation in this scientific meeting, and something comes up, and you say, well, but that question was not answered. It comes from a question that you have to think about. It does not to be a complicated question. Like Ray said, does diabetes cause cancer? Just a question, right? But there has to be a hypothesis regarding the answer to that question. So always think, okay, so my hypothesis is that, yes, in fact, diabetes causes cancer. It has to be your question and then your plausible answer to that question, right? Uh-oh. I don't want to buy any license, I guess. All right. Uh-oh. So your question, so you, first of all, before you embark on this whole study, maybe someone has already done the study and there's already an answer. So your first thing you have to do is look at the literature. So your question has already been answered, but was this a good study that answered that question, or was there problems with this study? Can you make it better? Can you find another part of that question that you can answer? Or you find that the question has been addressed, but some people says yes, some people say no. So you want to add to that body of evidence. Or there's a huge amount of data that you cannot even figure out what is going on. So then you have to get all the data together and try and come up with an analysis, a review of what is available in the literature. So you're young investigators here, so you have to choose a mentor. And many people come to me and say, okay, Dr. Garcia, give me a project that I can work on. And it's not about that. I've learned now recently that I want the young investigator to come to me with a question and with a literature search and say, you know, this is my question, this is the evidence that we have, or there's no evidence, so this is, help me in planning this study. So you go to the mentor with a question, the literature review, and a proposed project. And if it's a new study, you have heard about Dr. Kim, Anna Locke. What kind of studies is it going to be? Is it going to be a observational study? Is it going to be a randomized controlled trial? Is it going to be a feasibility study? Is it prospective or retrospective? Are you going to analyze existing databases? Okay, never mind. The pointer doesn't work. Or you want to summarize the literature, or are you just going to write a review article with your mentor? For young people, clearly you want to choose a project that is going to take you. A randomized controlled trial is going to take many, many years. You have to start with a feasibility study with something shorter that would allow you to finish it in a timely amount of time. Now, once you've completed the study, you ask yourself, what are the results are worth publishing. And I have to say, and many journals tend to publish only positive studies, studies that show something, but I think that negative studies are, as long as they're well-designed, is very important to trying to publish them. It may take you a longer time to publish them, but you will eventually get there. And your question is, do you have a story to tell? We are all storytellers. When we see a patient, we tell the story about this patient. When we write a paper, we're telling the story of what our question was and how we answered it. And is it significant? If yes to all these questions, you go ahead and write it up. If it's not very exciting, you can still find one part of it, what we call it, we spin it. We try and see what part of it would be interesting and what part of it would still be valuable for the patient. So writing a paper is not easy, it's hard. So remember, you're telling a story. This is a true story. And you have to tell it in the simplest and most linear way. Less is more. Don't try, just because you put a lot of words doesn't mean that that paper is better. In fact, the shorter, the better, the clearer. You look carefully at the revisions made by mentors and by others. It's very important to look at what people who have more experience tell you to do. And most of the improvements that I see in my experience is by cutting away words. There's just too many words in a paper. And remember again, less is more. The less you write, the more concise you write, the more important is going to be your paper. And practice, practice, and practice. So here's an example of a paper that I reviewed from one of my fellows. Essentially, I cut everything out. The problem now with Word, and I make comments, and I mostly what I do is I delete stuff, but the fellows, many times, they just accept changes. They didn't even look at what I did. Yeah, and I see people nodding. This is not correct. You have to learn. And sometimes I feel like I want to do it by hand again, so at least they have to have go to the effort of putting in and making the revisions. But you look at this and you say, okay, what did she do? How did it change? How did it become better? And the good thing is sometimes you might say, Dr. Garcia, I don't want to agree with you deleting that. No one has ever said that. They just take. So don't just accept the changes. Look at them and learn from them and discuss with mentor, all right? Now, always, when you're writing the paper, you've done a literature search. You have to put all the data that's there. So you always credit other people's work properly. If you ignore the work of others and don't reference them in your paper, that can constitute a step towards rejection. Never copy and paste chunks of text or take original ideas and facts from other sources without proper credit. You may well get caught, all right? And that is not only rejection, but they may call your mentor or the director of your institution to tell this part is exactly copied and pasted. You do not copy and paste from other, not even from yourself. Sometimes when they ask us to do reviews, they tell us, you cannot copy and paste from your own thing, so you have to somehow say it in a different way. Now, the paper has to be rigorous and honest, not superficial or sloppy. It's not a question of writing a paper every week. No. A nicely done paper may take weeks and weeks and weeks. It's not a question of speed. Now, it is difficult to choose a journal, okay? So there's a bunch of research that is being published worldwide. Most of it is not incredibly important. New journals are launched every week. The stories of publisher malpractice and deception are also on the rise. So how can you be sure that the journal you're considering is the right journal for your research? And it's not that you're going to choose the highest impact. You have to see what is your message and who's going to benefit most from the information that is there. So choose the right journal. Who is your audience? Who are you going to impact most with your message? Is it basic or clinical scientists? Is it clinicians? Is it primary providers? Is it specialists? Is yours a clinical or a basic study? So it depends. So if it's a descriptive study, you are never going to get into a high-impact journal. It's usually in medium or low-impact journals, so don't even start right up there. If it's a cohort study, but if it's a randomized study or it's a comparative study that's mechanistic, you may choose a high-impact study. Single center versus multi-center. Multi-center is always going to have a higher chance of getting published into a high-impact journal. Sample size small, like a feasibility study, is probably going to be into medium, low-impact study, whereas high-impact journals, well, you're not seeing my arrow at all, right? That's too bad. Here I am thinking that I'm showing you the arrow. Uh-oh, this pointer is not very good. But anyhow, sample size small is going to be more into medium, low impact studies. The larger it is, high impact journals. If it's just something that where the knowledge is incremental, oh, there's this shit. No. Where the knowledge is incremental, no. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to do the pointer, but it's not possible. Anyhow, so if the study just adds a little bit to whatever is there, it's going to be probably for a medium to low impact journal, whereas if it's novel, it's going to be a high impact journal. But you don't go to, for example, you don't go to the New England Journal of Medicine if it's not in the interest of a whole lot of internists, of general practitioners. If it's just a hepatology paper, you choose the hepatology journals. It has to do with your message, it has to do with what your study is. Now, what about open access journals? And those are proliferating to the maximum degree. What are they? They operate on an author pays business model. So you pay to get your research published, all right? Publishing online allows authors to sidestep the barriers of print, meaning their work is more quickly published because it's not going to come out in print, but it's only going to be online. And it's going to be freely available to a wider audience. So there's some clearly advantages. In the AASLD, we have hepatology communications, which we hope is going to be getting more and more of an impact factor. But beware of many of these open access journals that are what we call predatory journals. These are scam publishers that charge authors but do not provide the services that they promise. The majority will take payments without either never publishing the work or will publish the work but without any peer review. You can send them whatever you have and it'll be published, but it's entirely worthless, all right? So how to identify a predatory journal? Do you or your colleagues know about the journal? Does your mentor know about this journal? You have to read past issues of the journal. Always check the website. If there's a way to contact the publisher, that's fine. Very clearly, is there a peer review process? The value of all these papers is that you get independent experts to look at your work and see if it's worth publishing or not. It's not a negative thing, it's a positive thing to have peer review. Is it clear what fees are going to be charged? Are the editorial members recognized experts in their field? Is the publisher member of a recognized vetting organization? Those are the organizations that I'm quoting there that you can check to see if they form part of these reputable journals. If not, forget it. So this is an email that you may or may not see that I got some time ago about, it says here, Dear Dr. Garcia, greetings. Based on your impressive research record in the field of gastrology, right away you know that there's something very wrong, right? So you just delete. What is the difference? The credible journals are always going to have peer review. They're going to revise the paper. They're going to reject your paper. It's okay because you're going to learn from this. Predatory journals, they're like, welcome everybody because they don't care. They just want to publish so that people can pay to look at this, all right? So be aware because if you publish in these predatory journals, you will not improve your CV a lot, all right? So this is very important. So what happens once you submit your manuscript? What happens? First of all, you have to read and follow the journal instructions because if you don't right away, you've wasted a lot of time. The manuscript is received by journal staff. That staff decides that it fulfills all the journal format, the criteria, the abstract, the word count, the reference, etc., the figures. If it doesn't meet criteria, it's going to go right back to you. So you better read the instructions very carefully. So read and follow journal instructions. If it meets criteria, then it gets sent to the editor-in-chief who looks at the topic and the type of study and sends it to the most appropriate associate editor or deputy editor. Sometimes some journals like hepatology have both a deputy editor and then they have associate editors. Usually the initial revision takes about 24 hours. So what are the editors looking for? Important topics for their readers. Hepatology is read mostly by specialists in hepatology. So if it's important in the hepatology field, then they'll think, oh, this is a topic that is controversial, we're fine. If it's original, is it potential to change clinical practice and the potential to improve their impact factor of the journal, of course. If they think this is an important study that's going to be quoted a lot, that's going to increase the impact factor. The journal is very interested. Clear writing. So if at the beginning when you submit the paper, you read the abstract, and someone is going to be talking about writing an abstract. I forget who, but anyhow, Jazz. So the abstract is perhaps the most important thing. The editor is going to read the abstract. The abstract has to be clear. And again, you have to say, it's all about effective storytelling. If the paper is not understandable, if the abstract you don't understand, the thing that's going on is going to be a step towards early rejection. Now, once the deputy or associate editor reads your paper, an emphasis is placed on the abstract, the tables, and the figures, and it's going to be based on initial impression. Then there's going to be one or two decisions. Either early rejection, when the study is unlikely to be published, so they just early rejected. There's a letter to the author from the editor stating briefly the reason for early rejection. And in hepatology in 2019, the early rejection rate was 64%. So 2/3 of the papers were early rejected without even going through peer review. So the most common causes for this early rejection were, it's a retrospective study, it's not novel, was too preliminary, small sample, observational, and no mechanism, okay? Now, the other third were sent out for external peer review, usually 2 experts in the topic. That usually happens in 24 hours. The reviewers that are anonymous to the authors and to other reviewers submit written comments to the author explaining strengths and weaknesses of the study. The reviewers submit a written comment to the editors with a recommendation, and that they're given a limit of 15 days. Sometimes reviewers go a little bit over. And then the decisions are either to accept right away, which is incredibly, I don't think it ever happens. It's like less than 0.5% of the cases. Accept with revisions. Reject with an opportunity to resubmit, which doesn't mean that it's been accepted, but there's hope for acceptance. And then to reject. And so the whole process in general takes about 34 days. So there's new additional decision that expedites publication of a manuscript. You can fast track it. So editors of a journal may reject the manuscript but consult with sister journals. For example, gastroenterology will consult with CGH or CMGH. Hepatology asks you to fast track to hepatology communications. If the editors of the sister journal agree to accept the paper for fast track, the authors are offered this option. I find it sometimes that this saves you a lot of time as opposed to submitting to another journal. If, for example, you submit it to hepatology and there's opportunity to go to hepatology communication and the editor likes it, then you may get your data out there faster. Then the author revises the manuscript nevertheless and submits to the sister journal, and the manuscript enters review at sister journal exactly as a revised version. So it has the comments of the original reviewers, and you answer those original reviewers. And so you save a lot of time. Now, if your paper is rejected, don't go crazy. Do not get discouraged. All of us are in academic medicine. We have to be willing to accept rejection. Okay, we're rejected every day. Our grants are rejected, our papers are rejected. We're rejected all the time. It's not because people don't like us, it's just that because that's the way it is, right? But you have to learn from the reviews. You have to read the review very carefully and objectively and revise it, or if necessary, get more data, because many of the reviewers are very, very thoughtful, and they give you good ideas and good ways to look at things. So never say, oh, this guy's an idiot, look what he said. No, think about it very carefully. Or you can think of resubmitting to a more appropriate journal. Never resubmit an unrevised version. There's always something you can improve. There was a reason for which your paper was rejected. There's always some way. Sometimes it's clear that the reviewers didn't understand what you said, all right? So you just have to make it better so that the reviewers understand. Do not delete the part that led to the rejection. For example, because you may get the same reviewer that reviewed it the first time. So for example, one time I reviewed a paper and said, well, this is wrong because the primary outcome, there was some major problem with the time to randomization. I said, this is too long a time of randomization. So what did they do? In the next revision that was sent to me from another journal, they had taken away that time to randomization, okay? Not cool, all right? Anyhow, you may then explain it in your new revision, the reason we took this much time, we can analyze different times, etc., but never delete the part that led to rejection. If something lethal, if the reviewer said this has no remedy, you may have to rethink the study and see if there's something that is salvageable from your review, from your paper, all right? No, so how do I get my paper published? It starts with a good study. Then, a manuscript that describes the study in a simple, linear, and complete way. Selecting the appropriate journal is essential, and paying attention to what reviewers have to say will improve the study and facilitate publication. Never forget that. Thank you very much for your attention.